The early 1950s saw a boom in giant monster movies about man messing with nature. Whether it was Godzilla, the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, or the re-release of 1933's King Kong, horror was veering away from the dark and gothic towards something bigger, more cinematic, and more ambitious. The birth of television during this time meant that cinema had to find new, exciting, spectacular ways to draw audiences into theatres.
See underwater thrills never photographed before. See titanic underwater battles never dreamed of before in this most terrifying of the science fiction adventures.
In 1954, Universal Pictures had a go at creating a brand new monster, something to rival some of their most iconic monsters from the 30s and 40s. But this film had a very different vibe to Dracula, Frankenstein, or The Mummy. Less dark and shadowy, more bright and spectacular. This movie showed off its technical prowess by relying on beautiful underwater visuals and 3D effects. For this reason, it feels as though it belongs firmly in the era of 50s monster movies. But it also gave audiences one of the last great iconic monsters of the golden age of Universal horror. Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of nature in horror, and we discuss Jack Arnold's Creature from the Black Lagoon. Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike Muncer. As ever, I am your host. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre, one subgenre at a time. We are currently in the middle of our 10th season, exploring nature biting back in horror, and this is part 5. In this week's episode, as that intro suggested, we're going to be talking about Universal's classic 50s monster movie, Creature from the Black Lagoon from 1954. This will be a spoilerific review. Give yourself a treat. Go and watch it before you listen to our discussion. Also, I thought I would give you guys a little bonus treat as part of this week's episode. So, in the second half of this week's episode, I have included a discussion of a film that was previously on Patreon behind a paywall. This is a movie that owes a lot to Creature from the Black Lagoon, so I thought it would be fun to pair them up in this week's episode. So later on, you're going to hear my discussion with friend of the pod, Steph McKenna, about Guillermo del Toro's Best Picture winning movie about a girl and a fish creature. It is, of course, The Shape of Water from 2017. So that is going to be in the second half of this week's episode. But for now, let's get into the original Creature from the Black Lagoon. Joining me to discuss this movie, I've got a long-time friend of the pod. She was last here in our home invasion season discussing Roger Corman's The Pit and the Pendulum and Fall of the House of Usher with me. And she's back. Please welcome filmmaker Axel Carolyn. Hello, Axel.
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Really good, thank you. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me again. This is so fun.
So good to have you back. Axel, this series we're talking all about kind of the dangers of nature, the perils of nature in horror, everything from kind of like animal attack movies to creature features and all of that kind of thing. What are your kind of general thoughts on this subgenre?
You know, I feel like there are some types of movies that I'm always going to chase and I'm always going to want to watch. And then there's others that take a little bit more convincing. But once I've decided to sit down and actually watch them, I usually very much enjoy them. And that's the second category is where this belongs to. I feel like anytime I hear of a nature attack, I'm like, this is not really my kind of thing. And then I sit down, I watch it, and I usually think they're a huge amount of fun. And then some of them also give us something to think about, you know, with the whole, now there's very often the subplot of we're destroying the planet and we should pay attention to what we're doing. And I wish I had a list of the movies you're going to cover so I could go, actually, there's a ton that I really know. But yeah, I love all horror in any case, you know, there's very little that I'd be reluctant to watch.
Yeah, there's one of the things that one of my guests said a couple of weeks ago was interesting about how
it doesn't so much overlap with kind of the gothic a lot of the time, right? I think that's kind of, we'll talk about that a little bit, I think maybe with this movie too, you know, and in comparison to kind of the earlier Universal monster movies. But I know that obviously we've talked together a lot, Axel, about like more gothic horror movies and your love for the kind of gothic. And I guess like that can be one of the things that's kind of missing stylistically from these types of movies, right?
I guess so, very often. And also, they're often not properly supernatural, which is also something that I really like. Usually I'm more attracted to the supernatural than to something that I could encounter in real life. And they kind of, I guess there's all kinds of animal attack in nature movies that I would find very with a tinge of supernatural, or where it's not going to happen. But then there's others that seem so much closer to what we could actually encounter, or what could happen to us with the weather changing, or with the climate changing, that just make me very uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure. I actually get really like quite tense with some of these sorts of movies, because I'm not super brave when it comes to, like, I would not go swimming in the ocean where there were sharks, for example, and that kind of thing, right? What about you? Are you quite brave just generally in life? Like, are you quite an outdoorsy person? Are you good with kind of animals and nature and that kind of thing?
No, I definitely wouldn't say that I am. No, I love animals, but in a very different way from, I think that a lot of people say I love animals, and that means I like petting them, I like eating them, I like enjoying what they have to give me. I kind of more like animals to do their thing. I respect them as beings. I don't want to eat them. They don't need to be in my living room. I have a dog who I adore. She's the light of my life. But generally speaking, I kind of feel like there's a place for everybody, and the place of an elephant is not anywhere near me, for example. Or the place of a mosquito shouldn't necessarily be in my home. And I would love to say that I'm a big outdoorsy person. I love going on like rock climbing expeditions, or every once in a while, but I'll do it in a very, very safe way, and under no circumstances will I be camping.
Yeah, same here. I mean, you live in California. Ever come across any snakes or anything like that in the wild?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
I grew up in Europe, where it feels like nature is kept at bay all the time, unless you're in London, and every once in a while you'll have a fox encounter, which is very exciting, very kind of thrilling. It reminds you that you live in an actual world. But in California, like Los Angeles, is clawed back from the wilderness. And so if you go 10 minutes away from my place, if you go walk a trail, you will see, I did it 2 days ago, we saw a snake that my dog almost stepped on. A small snake. It's not particularly scary, but it's interesting because that's, as a European, again, it's not something that I'm used to. There's lizards everywhere. There's coyotes. There's a whole bunch of coyotes who live in the graveyard across the street from me. And sometimes I go roller skate, or, around the graveyard or in the graveyard, and I'll see one or two, and I'll be like, oh, this is so beautiful. Let's go see what they're doing. And then you follow them, and there's 12 waiting for you. It's a little bit like, oh shit, I might be devoured by coyotes 5 minutes from my house. This is exciting. It's there's spiders and mountain lions every once in a while. That's
wow. Yeah,
it's
mountain. That was something I was not keen to encounter when we recently went to the US. Obviously, we met up Axel, which was really fun. But like, I also went walking in Yosemite, and there was a sign that was like, beware of mountain lions in this area. And they said something like, if you come across one, you have to just like wave your arms about and shout so that you scare it away. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to scare a mountain lion away. It's like, I'm probably just going to run the fuck away if I see
Which is the one thing they recommend not doing. But of course, you bet if I see a bear on a trail, I will not just calm down and slowly back away. I think I'll either freeze and wait until I get eaten, or I'll run away and throw all my stuff like in some cartoon. But there's bears as well. Apparently, there's like a little section of LA towards the east called Monrovia, and frequently they have bears come down from the mountains and they'll hang out by the pool.
Oh, wow. Oh my god. Yeah, I mean, again, like you, I love kind of admiring these kind of creatures from afar, but I don't think I'd want to just like stumble across one. We don't need to be in each other's vicinities, right?
Yeah.
But I think, I think it does tap into something just innate, right, in human beings. Like, there's something about movies like Jaws that, like, it basically created an entire phobia, didn't it? Like, these movies do really like hit us, that, something inside of us, I feel like, that kind of gives these movies that kind of endurance and that power,
Mm-hmm. I think they remind us of our place in the world, and that's always disturbing because we always live in this fiction where human beings seem to be apart from nature and don't consider themselves parts of the animal kingdom. We somehow see ourselves above it or separate from it. And I think that this just reminds us that we're just mammals. We're just part of it. And at the end of the day, when you take away all the technology and all the protections that we've created for ourselves, when we're just individuals in the middle of nature, we don't have claws, we don't have teeth, we're not big carnivores, we're not that threatening. So anything that reminds us of that is, I think, what gives you a sense of being part of something much larger that you don't control, actually, that you don't generally, as an individual, control or have any power over.
Exactly. Like, suddenly I think we're made to feel very kind of small and powerless and insignificant, right? I think, I think it's a good reminder of that. So we're going to talk about a fun, not a real animal, but a fun kind of nature-related creature feature, right, from the 1950s. So we're going to discuss Creature from the Black Lagoon from 1954.
Science couldn't explain it, but there it was, alive in the deep, deep waters of the Amazon. A throwback to a creature that had existed 100 million years ago, immensely strong and destructive. A woman's beauty, the bait that brought it out of its lair. See underwater thrills never photographed before. See Titanic underwater battles never dreamed of before in this most terrifying of the science fiction adventures.
Just set the scene for us, Axel. What is this movie all about?
Okay, I like to keep my summaries very short. I feel like if you haven't seen the movie, you probably don't want to hear too much from me in any case. Basically, the fossil of a hand is found that looks like the missing link between fish and land animals. Kind of, it seems to belong to an amphibian, but it's a little bit more human-like than expected. That's found in the Amazon. And so a team of scientists leave on an expedition to the Amazon to research the creature. And what they find is much more than fossilized remains. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Exactly. Axel, what's your kind of history with this movie? Do you remember when you first kind of came to this film?
I don't. I know I've always been aware of the creature. I think it's one of those classic monsters that pretty much everybody has an awareness of. Even as a kid, you've seen the design. It's so well known. It's like Frankenstein. It's kind of part of the collective psyche. And I'm not sure when I actually saw it for the first time. I know it's kind of late. It wouldn't have been as a small child. I saw Dracula. I saw Frankenstein as a younger child. I think I saw The Invisible Man pretty early on. But I don't think I came to Creature from the Black Lagoon until probably my late teens, I would say. And this is where I'm a little bit nervous, but it's not my favorite. It's probably my least favorite Universal monster, along with Phantom of the Opera, I would say. And I know a lot of people love the creature more than any other monster, so I'm very worried that they will revoke my horror fan card and or think, why on earth am I the one who's picked to discuss this movie? I like it a lot. I'm just not as obsessed with it as I am with like Bride of Frankenstein, for example.
Yeah, and I think that's fair enough because it is really different to those other movies, isn't it? Like, I think it's almost, it does really stand apart. And I don't know, like I said, I think it looks different to the others. There's a different vibe. It came so much later than a lot of the big heyday Universal monster movies, doesn't it? So it does feel like it's very much a kind of separate era and a separate type of a horror movie, doesn't it? I think. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a very different time that they made it in. It's a time where, I guess in the early 50s, they were doing all the Abbott and Costello movies where they were making fun of the old classic monsters. So those felt very outdated, I think, at the time. And the classic monster were re-released in theaters, but they were the spook shows. Like, they were kind of, that was the old-fashioned thing that your mom and dad used to watch and that you go see to kind of make fun of, I think, a little bit. It's the time where the kind of movies that became very popular were more tinged with sci-fi, kind of the atomic bomb and its consequences. And I think it's very significant that they picked Jack Arnold as the director who did It Came from Outer Space, because that was a big hit. And that was exactly what people were looking for at the time. It was that kind of mix of horror and sci-fi. And that was all about aliens and new technologies and how the world had been affected by those new technologies. And then there was also a time, I guess, where drive-ins were starting and where generally movies were aimed at teenagers much more than they were previously. So I think the industry was generally evolving and changing. They were trying to get people away from television as well. Like, it's kind of, in some ways, it's a little bit like the transition we're going through right now, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, I think, because I think there is something of, those movies of the 50s, the big monster movies of the 50s, there's so much spectacle, isn't there? I talked about this a lot when we did our kind of sci-fi alien series, when we talked about movies like The Blob and It Came from Outer Space and all of that stuff. Like, they're kind of silly drive-in feature movies, but they are ones that you kind of have to watch on the big screen, right? And we'll talk about this in a minute, but obviously 3D became a thing here. And yeah, I guess it's the studio's way, isn't it, of kind of driving people, literally to movie theaters rather than staying at home. And yeah, Universal, I guess, just trying to kind of keep up with the times, I guess, with their monster movies.
Yeah. It's really interesting that this is lumped into the Universal Monsters movies in some ways, because it is kind of on the verge between the two in a weird way, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it is. It does kind of stand apart, doesn't it? And let's talk a little bit about Jack Arnold's direction then. Like, how do you find the way he directs this story, just the way this movie looks? Because I do think actually, it does look quite beautiful, doesn't it, this movie?
It does. And it harkens back to Universal Monsters, the classics, as much as it can. But at the same time, it takes place in the real world, or what is supposed to be a version of the real world. One of the things I find really interesting, and I had never thought of it until I rewatched it recently, was who swims in the Amazon? Like, those,
oh my God,
people show up in their little shorts and full face makeup. And it's, what I find fascinating is I'm sure they've done a lot of research to know what the world would have looked like there and make it as believable as possible. There's great work being done with the sound design, for example, that constantly reminds you that there's insects and that there's, things buzzing around you. There's animal cries. And it gives you a sense of you're oppressed in that very small part of the jungle, of this immense jungle. And at the same time, it doesn't visually make you feel like there's much out there. They swim, the water is clear. There's not a lot of mosquitoes or parasites or whatever you would expect to find in those waters. There's a lot of current in the water. There's a lot of things like that nowadays, if you were to make that movie, you would try to make much more oppressive and much more accurate to how dangerous the Amazon, the environment itself is. But in this case, it feels like they really made the choice to just make the creature be the threat. It's not so much the environment, strangely. It's not so much we're in the middle of nowhere and we might get stuck here. It's we're in the middle of nowhere and there's a thing that's circling our boat. It's a really interesting choice in that regard, I find.
That is a really good point, actually. It's like, so many of the classic horror movies are about that kind of bad place, like the haunted house or the castle or whatever. Or even King Kong, which we discussed a couple of weeks ago, has like a whole island full of things that want to kill you, right? Whereas, this movie it kind of does the opposite. It's like a paradise, isn't it? It's like these people are lured towards this absolute paradise of a location that just happens to have this, this dangerous inhabitant inside it. But yeah, I think that's so true. Like, they so easily could have made this, because the Amazon is a terrifying place by all accounts, right? Like, everything there, probably wants to kill you or bite you or eat you. And you just don't really get that in this movie. And I wonder if that's again because of, it's almost like the technology and the visuals come come first in this movie before the story, maybe? Because again, I feel like this is a movie where they wanted to show off those gorgeous shots of, you know, people swimming from underwater, and I don't know, it almost feels like it's like it gives them an excuse, doesn't it, to have lots of long swimming sequences and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's certainly that. There's also that sense they describe it as a paradise. So I think that in opposition to the Gothic movies we've seen until now with Universal, where you go to the scary castle or the scientist lab, or, you know, the weird little European village where the invisible man might show up at any time. Instead, they present something that's supposed to be very beautiful and very aspirational. I doubt anybody in production has ever been to the Amazon before they made this movie. But I love that they do mention several times the term, like, it's a paradise no one comes back from.
Yeah.
That's a really cool idea, I find. And then it gives us, and this, I don't know how much of it is a projection of 21st century thinking onto a movie made at a very different time. But when you watch it and you see them show up with their steamboat that's polluting, and they smoke cigarettes and they throw the cigarette in the water, and there's so much about it that feels like those humans come to destroy this beautiful nature. They see the creature, they shoot at it with the spear gun. You know, there's no respect for the environment they're in, even though they're scientists and they're there to take their little samples of water and of rocks but you've already contaminated all your samples with all the stuff that you've thrown in there, and with the poison that they pour in the water, poisoning all the fish and killing all the fish just because they want to try to find the creature inside and hope to, like, you know, put it to sleep or something. I remember reading an interview, and I can't remember who with, of someone involved with production at the time, who said something along the lines of that it wasn't purposefully supposed to show men come in and destroying the environment. That the cigarette was not something that they would have thought twice at the time. No one watched it at the time, apparently, and went, "Ooh, you're throwing your cigarette in the lagoon? This is not cool." But now it is, when you watch it, you can't help just going, "Oh, come on. No one's been here ever, and you're polluting it the second you walk in."
Yeah, that's so, because that's what makes this movie interesting, I think, is that kind of eco vibe to it in that regard. And we're seeing this already so much in these movies. You know, this is King Kong. These people kind of, their kind of ambition and their hubris of kind of thinking they can tame this island, and these creatures kind of coming back to get them. Godzilla even, right? People kind of messing with technology and awakening things in the ocean. Like, and this idea of kind of man going where they should not go and messing with nature and kind of suffering the consequences. It absolutely feels like this is part of that in a way, right? Maybe even just accidentally, but that's really interesting. Yeah,
it is. The way we look at it today would definitely involve that reading, I think. At the time, honestly, I don't know. It's so difficult to put yourself back into that mindset that's kind of towards the end of the colonies as well, where a lot of people would have had very exotic experiences being in environments that they never would have encountered otherwise, and came back with stories of, you know, land rich with minerals and with whatever they went.
Yes.
And that idea of the paradise and of the people who live a more simple life out there. And I don't know. I wish I knew more about what the original intentions were. I'm pretty sure that the monster is not supposed to be the villain. That's for sure.
No.
It's supposed to be scary, but the real villain is the guy who's willing to put the lives of the other scientists at risk just to bring back this creature for experimentations or to show it to the world. That's very clear. But does that mean necessarily that it has a green, friendly message of respecting the environment and respecting nature? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. And those scenes, those scenes in the water, obviously, like you say, no one has probably been to the Amazon at this point. It doesn't really look like the Amazon, but it does look beautiful. It was all shot like the Universal backlot, right? Am I right in thinking like everything was kind of done at the studios?
I think it was shot at the Universal backlot, and then they said that a lot of the underwater sequences were shot in Florida. And I'm guessing a lot of the wider scenes with the nature around it would have been shot in Florida. It's very convincing in some ways. I mean, I wouldn't say it's very much the Amazon, but I would say it doesn't look like a backlot for sure. They've done a great job. There's some shots where the virtual projection is a little bit obvious, but generally speaking, it looks pretty good. And the underwater sequences are gorgeous. Like they're truly the iconic shot of Julie Adams' stun double swimming, and she's kind of backlit. There we see her from underneath, and then the creature is mimicking what she's doing. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's incredible. And I love that when they touch the bottom, they kick up silt, and then the water gets a little bit less clear, and then the creature can hide a little bit more easily. And there's a little bit of just some plants underneath the water, and some areas where the creature can actually hide. But I feel like I think that between the design of the creature and the look of the underwater sequences, that's why this movie gets so much love.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's what the movie is selling itself on. It feels like, right? I mean, there are a lot of them. The underwater sequences, right? Like it really is going. Look at how amazing this is! Like those stunning, beautiful shots of just people swimming and the creature swimming and that kind of thing. Like that's its thing, isn't it? I think this movie, and actually, I think it does. You said it's not your favorite, and I sort of agree with you, and I think maybe it does lose something just watching it at home. We hosted a screening of it in London last year at the beautiful Regent Street Cinema, one of the oldest cinemas in London, and it looked absolutely stunning, and I think you do get a little bit more out of it, I think, watching it, with an audience on the big screen. And it was, like we said at the very beginning of this chat, this is the 1950s. These movies were very much designed for that purpose, weren't they, I think?
I saw it on the big screen in 3D once, and it was beautiful. It's a beautiful looking movie. And again, the underwater sequences are fantastic. The creature design is incredible. Where it loses me a little bit is that I find those characters are interchangeable. She's the main, Kay, the main girlfriend / scientist / she couldn't be more of a caricature of the woman in peril, which I don't know how it was received at the time, but is incredibly grating when you watch it now. I kept thinking, if she bites her wrists and screams one more time, God, she starts running and she falls on the ground right away. She passes out when the monster shows up. She's so passive. And then there's something about the way that the creature is introduced is really cool. When the claw comes out, that the hand comes out of the water, and that happens at least 3 or 4 times that you just see the hand come out of the water. But then once you've seen the creature entirely, once the creature is out of the water, the way it's shot is very close to what they were doing 20 years before that, which is the stumbling monster coming slowly towards you, extending arms, and that's a little bit less effective. But really where it shines and where it works is those early shots revealing the creature from behind some plants in the water, and there's a slight kind of blurred effect on him, and he's looking from a distance, and then the beauty of those swimming shots. That's fantastic. Like, I completely understand how they can hang a whole movie on that, for sure.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting, though, because I sort of agree with you about the characters, but is that not sort of an issue with most Universal monster movies? I mean, like, is that not the case with a lot of the female leads in those early 1930s ones as well? Like, is this one that different?
Sure. I think maybe I'm giving the other ones more of a pass because 25 years in between should have made a difference.
Sure.
And it feels like this is a well-rehashed cliche by that point. There are for some reason, I've always liked the female character in The Mummy, which I know is not one of most people's favorites, but
yeah,
I do like it a lot. And I think that the monster had a lot of personality, and they usually could speak as well. So you could hang a little bit more on their presence, while in this case, the more you see the creature, well, that's not true. I was going to say the more you see the creature, the less effective it is, but actually that's not true because the suit is so good. But it's not like you're going to have long dialogue scenes with the creature. It's not like you can hang it out entirely on the personality of the monster here. So what's also interesting that struck me right away from the beginning of the movie is how much sexier this is trying to be.
Yes, I agree, yes.
Not just Kay, not just Julie Adams, but the men also in their little swimming trunks, and they're all kind of hunky, and they're filmed in a way from the beginning that's supposed to be like, ooh, okay, this is a different time.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought the same thing. Like it is again, like everything in this movie is kind of eye candy, right? Like I don't know, everything is made to look as beautiful as possible. Yeah, including the actors. Absolutely. Like, I think that brings a little something. And you're absolutely right. You know, I think that's true that, you know, even some of the older movies, they had those, you know, monster performances to maybe, you know, take the spotlight a lot of the time, which is harder for this particular movie, this particular creature. So we do spend a lot of time just with the character of Kay, right? And David and Mark. And I suppose you're right about that. The film does spend a lot of time just on the kind of interactions between those characters on the boat, and there's not a whole lot to them. I suppose you're right, but like you said, they're beautiful to look at, all of them.
Yeah, even the creature is ripped.
Yeah, it's so true. We'll come to the creature in a second, but let me ask you about the 3D, because this came sort of just at, or maybe even just slightly after the big sort of peak of 3D, that kind of first big wave of it, really, wasn't it, in Hollywood? Like early 50s, 1953, when we had movies like House of Wax and that kind of thing. This came just off the back of that. You saw it yourself in 3D, right? How do you find that, the kind of the 3D element to this?
It's a fun gimmick. To me, 3D has never felt like more than that.
Yeah.
And the 3D that I think we watch it in is not the same process that they used at the time. So it's not the same kind of glasses and all. So I don't really know how much of a difference it would have made at the time. From what I was reading, most theaters were not equipped with that technology. So most people, even on original release, saw it in 2D in any case. I don't think it loses anything by not watching it in 3D, personally. I don't, the only times personally that I really like 3D is when they do that gimmicky little pointing at the audience, like My Bloody Valentine 3D, with the amount of times you have the pickaxe through the face or things like that. I love that. But a whole movie in 3D, if it's not supposed to poke at you, I don't personally see the appeal. But yeah, it was amusing to see that House of Wax was the big 3D movie of the early 50s. And by 54, when this came out, the big cities may have had a screen or two where you could go see it in 3D, but everybody else saw it flat.
Yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it? It always happens, it feels like 3D becomes a thing and then everyone's bored of it, instantly. You get that burst of it in the early 80s as well, and then obviously there was that little burst of it in the late 2000s around kind of Avatar, right? And yeah, I agree with you. I actually think 3D is a gimmick, right? It's like a theme park funfair ride, and so actually they should just go for it with that regard. Like, let's have things coming out of the screen at us. When it goes for the whole, like you say, the kind of Avatar thing, I suppose, where you're like, let's just sit for 3 hours and watch a movie with the 3D element to give it more depth or whatever. I don't know if it actually does give it that much more depth, Like, I would rather have things fly out the screen at me. Yeah,
because you end up getting used to it in any case. But it's also interesting that they made the choice when they were thinking of technology for this. They thought, let's go 3D, but they didn't think, let's go color.
Yeah, and actually, I do. Yeah, that's true, because this could have so easily been in color, couldn't it? And we were really in the kind of big sort of Technicolor age at this point. But it looks better, I think, doesn't it, in a way, for being black and white. It again, I know we keep saying it, but it really does look beautiful, and that cinematography is gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, and it ties it in better with the classics, I think. Also, it helps make it look like it's of a piece with the movies from 15 years before, which perhaps at the time was the issue, was that it wasn't different enough. But no, I love that they stuck with that. And I think that color probably was much more expensive. I don't know. I wouldn't know for sure, but I would guess that color was more expensive than 3D in terms of also how much bang for your buck you get when you can put the 3D on the poster rather than in full color.
Yes, yeah, fair enough. It's totally fair. Yeah. So let's talk about the creature itself then. Like, first of all, just the general kind of look of it. Like you said, it's so iconic, right? I feel like everyone, even if people haven't seen the film, they kind of know what the creature from the Black Lagoon looks like, right? What do you think of it? The way, I mean, it was designed by Millicent Patrick, right? And obviously the makeup artist Bub Westmore, but yeah, how do you kind of find the general look and design of the creature?
I think it's one of the most stunning things, one of the most incredible achievements in makeup, honestly. Practically speaking, because it looks so good, because it can go in the water, because someone could swim through it, because it just, if nothing else, just for the practicalities of it, knowing that they made it in 1954 when the materials available were not as developed as what we have now. Even today, if you have to make a monster that has to have entire underwater sequences, this is no small feat. But like at the time, and then the design of it, that weird kind of fish-like face that looks like it's kind of stunned in one expression, but somehow looks, it could look very goofy, but it doesn't. It looks very striking. It looks very curious. It looks like it's wondering what the hell these new creatures are that are invading its environment. Even stuck in one expression, you can project so much on it. And that kind of weird, I've always loved that, half fish, half human idea. I find it very disturbing because fish is like such a completely different type of animal that we find so entirely foreign. So mixing it with a humanoid silhouette is so incredibly disturbing and striking. But
yeah, and it's interesting how so often, because you're right, like it is a weird thing mixing humans with fish, and yet it's so often used as kind of like in romance or sexy stuff. Obviously mermaids, and maybe we'll mention at the end here about The Shape of Water as well, right? But it's also used a lot for the kind of Beauty and the Beast narrative, isn't it, as well, which is a strange thing for a kind of fish humanoid type creature.
Yeah, I'm not sure I quite get that. I think that when it comes to my fish humanoids, I'm more kind of Stuart Gordon's Dagon.
Yeah.
You're slowly turning into a fish, and none of this is good. That's more disturbing to me. Yeah, in The Shape of Water, that idea of the romance between the two is, if you think of it very basically, it's so weird, and it's so strange that I would not personally be attracted to a big fish. So I don't expect a big fish to be attracted to me, but somehow human beings go in the Amazon, and the stories that we come up with is our species is so beautiful. Fish can't help falling in love with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like all creature, I mean, it's the same with King Kong, I suppose. Like, we love this idea that we're so beautiful that all species tend to fall in love with us, I think, right? It's so funny. But it is an amazing design. It is an amazing looking creature, isn't it? And the performances too. There are several actors that played the creature, right? Whether it was on land or underwater. One of the actors, who was it? Was it Rico Browning, who was able to like hold his breath for up to 4 minutes at a time for those underwater sequences as well, right? Oh my god!
And he was neither an actor nor a swimmer. He wasn't originally a stunt person. From what I understand, he was a student who was hired to bring the scouting crew to the locations in Florida just to guide them. And then they wanted to film some tests, and he said, well, I can swim and you can film that. And they realized that he could hold his breath for up to 5 minutes. He said he could hold his breath 2 minutes if he had to do a lot of action, a lot of thrashing around, because that uses a lot of oxygen.
Yeah.
But if it was just kind of being underwater, he could hold it to 4 to 5 minutes. And then he could breathe with the tube as well, which a lot of people are not able to do or freak out when they have to stay too long in the water. So it's completely kind of a piece of luck that they discovered him.
Wow, it is amazing, isn't it? That is incredible, because again, that you need that. Those beautiful elongated underwater swimming sequences, and again, just how kind of beautiful and majestic those sequences look, because there is a lot of performance in this creature, isn't there, as well? The creature doesn't get to talk or anything, but there is such a strong kind of performativity to this creature that all these actors kind of embody. It's amazing to look at.
And it's both being able to build a suit that allows the actor to emote and to move properly, but also having an actor who's strong enough to move, especially through water, holding that weight on him, doesn't see anything, because I think it was just tiny holes to see through, and I'm not sure that the holes would always align, especially when you're swimming, would always align perfectly. So how much could he see? Who knows? Being able to not get completely claustrophobic, being stuck in that suit for so long, and then being stuck underwater and breathing through a tube, and just there's so much to it that's absolutely fantastic. And they said that the suit had pieces of lead to keep him underwater so that he wouldn't float back up in various places. So you also have to swim, moving those extra weights, making sure that must have been exhausting. And then I was also reading that the creature is green on land, but for the underwater sequences is yellow. Like they had a different suit so that it would be seen better in the underwater sequences.
But that's really interesting, because obviously this film is in black and white, but in my head, this creature is supposed to be a kind of black sort of colour, right? Is that what colour it's supposed to be, do you think, in the world of the story? I guess because I picture the creature that we see in later movies or in stuff like The Shape of Water.
I think it's usually represented when it's colorized, or when you see publicity photos that are colorized, it's usually dark green.
Right, yes, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. But not that kind of like vibrant green or anything like that. It's kind of dark.
No, I guess it would be a color
Yeah.
that would fit within the environment out there, and like dark green waters, I suppose.
Hello everybody, just interrupting this week's episode momentarily to thank this week's sponsor. That's $20 Patreon subscriber Kurt from the Dark Overtones podcast. Kurt sent me a message to say, "Hello Mike, thank you for all your hard work you put into EOH. It's inspired me to follow one of my passions in a way that I never thought possible by starting my very own podcast on horror films, dark science fiction, and everything in between. The podcast, called Dark Overtones, dives into the themes that drive the horror that scares us. The pod features discussions with experts to help understand the deeper meanings in our favourite horror and why it turns our blood cold. Researchers and practitioners of witchcraft join me for discussions of The Witch and A Dark Song. A Nordic rune interpreter and reader talks to me about the hidden messages in Midsummer. Even an old friend, Mary Wilde, joins me to give her thoughts on the psychological pressure cooker, The Invitation. These are just a few of the films discussed in Series 1. So if this sounds like something that might be interesting, check out the Dark Overtones podcast. The first few episodes are available, with new episodes dropping every week. Thank you, Mike. Can't wait to see where EOH goes from here." Oh, amazing. Kurt, thank you so much for that message. That podcast sounds awesome. I always love hearing these kinds of, well, obviously I love a horror podcast, but I love hearing those kind of particular specialists and experts talk about different areas of the horror genre. So I cannot wait to dive into that. And of course, I'm always very up for hearing Mary Wilde's interpretations. So yeah, consider me subscribed. And for anyone else who might be interested, that podcast is called Dark Overtones, and you can find that wherever you get your podcasts. One more time, a huge thank you to this week's sponsor. That's $20 Patreon subscriber Kurt. And if you want to become an official Evolution of Horror sponsor, get your own little dedicated segment on an episode just like this one, then you simply need to subscribe to our Patreon at a $20 level. This will get you access to all of the bonus episodes that we release on a weekly basis, and you will get to send me a message that I will read out in an episode of the main podcast. And in that message, you can say pretty much anything you like. And if you've got your own podcast or blog to plug as part of that message, then feel free. Just head to patreon.com/evolution of horror. That's patreon.com/evolution of horror. Axel, let's talk a little bit more about the creature. And, you know, there's the kind of sympathetic element, I suppose, to this creature. You've mentioned it already. You know, is this creature even the villain? Because this has been something that I think is really interesting when we talk about quote-unquote nature and natural creatures in horror cinema. Now, of course, the creature isn't a real animal, as, you know, in the same way that Godzilla and King Kong aren't. But I think the similarity here with all of these is that they were creatures that were just going about their business in their own environments, and they were disturbed or messed with or intruded by humans, right? And yes, the creature does eat a lot of people. There's a big chunk of this movie where he is just picking people off and he's shredding people up and all sorts. But at the same time, I can't help but feel a little bit for this creature. Like, he doesn't seem like the out-and-out villain, right?
No, I'm not. I think he's fairly sympathetic. I think it's he's being disturbed in his environment. He's being shot at. Fish are being poisoned. He's being chased. It's a pretty normal. I mean, I would be pretty pissed if someone showed up in my living room and behaved like that. I would also kind of try to throw them out. So he's very sympathetic in that respect. The only thing that, of course, makes it difficult to understand is that he has that bizarre crush on Kay, and that's why I guess he makes sure that they stay there, and he keeps coming back onto the boat. And in terms of motivations, I find that fairly slim, but I guess there must have been a reason for him to keep coming. I wanted to mention also, did you ever see those photos of the early tests of the creature?
No, I don't think so. No.
Okay, so there's some. I saw them in one of the books that I have here, but I'm sure they're floating about online too. But there's a couple of different photos of absolutely ridiculous versions of the creature. Earlier versions where one looked like, I think it was described like an Oscar, like an Academy Award statue. Like it was all kind of slick, but it had like a weird cone shaped head. And it makes sense in terms of this is something that's supposed to be able to swim and go fast through water.
Right.
So it's super aerodynamic, but it looks so dumb. And then there's like another one that just looks like stretchy PJs with a weird plastic face and plastic muscles. It's hilarious. And then apparently when they did the test to put them underwater, the rubber would stretch and become massive. Like you have this super big, expansive creature in his PJs. Yeah, I recommend you check it out because it's really funny to watch. And another thing is Mallory O'Meara wrote a fantastic book about Millicent Patrick, about the woman who designed the creature and who at the time had her credit taken by Bud Westmore, who was the head of makeup at Universal. So everything kind of fell under his purview. So he put his name on it, and he didn't like the fact that people wanted to use the woman to show that this woman, this fantastic woman, had created the design. So there was a whole war kind of trying to hide the fact that he didn't do it himself, and that's related in this book, and it's really, really good.
That, yeah, I've heard about that it took another kind of half century essentially for her to get the credit for that she deserved for the design, right, as well, which is just crazy. Yeah,
and I think that Mallory did a fantastic job making sure that we today have heard of her, because until the book came out, the name was very, very rarely heard, and now I think that she's becoming much more of a familiar name to fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So finally, then this final act where he kind of wants to kidnap Kay, the creature, right? Like, what's going on here? Is it just that he's got like some sort of romantic crush on her? Do you think? Like, what's his kind of obsession with Kay here?
I don't know. If I had to come up with some kind of messed up idea, I would think that he doesn't have a lady creature, and he's thinking that the species is about to disappear, and he needs to find something that's vaguely humanoid to mate with.
Yes.
Which is kind of dark, but is in line with what the movie is trying to show us, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, it's interesting. And again, like, I know they wanted to go for a kind of Beauty and the Beast type of spin, which you can very much see there. But yeah, and I think this is the thing. Like, again, you know, the story itself is pretty thin, isn't it? It's pretty flimsy. It feels to me like this is a kind of a technical kind of exercise, a technical marvel in a way, right? Like, you are marveling at the beautiful cinematography, the 3D maybe at the time, the creature design, those underwater shots. Like, it's all about the visuals, I feel like, this movie, you know?
I agree. I feel the story itself is not particularly developed. It's very repetitive too. And it really is. I was reading that the inspiration came to the producer, William Allen. There's two different versions, but both of them involve basically, it's either the discovery of a prehistoric fish or it's someone mentioning a legend of a hellfish in the Amazon. And both of them are kind of, it's that idea of evolution and of something being caught between two stages of evolution, which is really fascinating, but they do so little with it. And yeah, I think that it's the kind of movie that could have been very easily forgotten had it not somehow gathered so much amazing talent and given us something that's so technically incredibly made. You know, the achievements are unbelievable, and that's again, mostly the makeup and mostly the underwater sequences are
Yeah.
what makes it stand out.
Yeah, it's all about that monster, isn't it? I think, and the sequences involving the monster, and that's why I think you're right. I think that's why it stands out. That's why, because it's a Universal movie, and so it is named alongside the other monsters. It's just part of that group, isn't it? And so it kind of stands the test of time in that way. Yeah, and the movie did do really, really well, I think, didn't it? And obviously, it spawned sequels and kind of attempts at remakes and that kind of thing. Like, how familiar are you, Axel, with... I haven't had a chance to actually watch the sequels, but how familiar are you with, like, what's come after it?
I haven't seen them in a long time. I wanted to rewatch them yesterday and I didn't get the chance, but I was not a huge fan. I feel like the makeup is modified for each of the sequels and it's never quite as good, and the creature is never interpreted quite as well. In the third one, then the creature walks among us, I think he's downright goofy. And there's reasons for that in the script where he's been burned. And if I remember well, it's like he gets accidentally burned. And then it's revealed that underneath his fish appearance, he has lungs and he has human skin or something like that.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense. But but then he can't go back to the lagoon. He can't go back in the water and swim, or he would have to evolve back into a fish creature. It's very like they play with a lot of weird concepts, and I kind of like that. But I also feel like it never goes really far enough. It has the usual. The sequel, from what I recall, has that usual kind of he's getting captured and he's being brought to civilization, and look at how badly we behave with these creatures that we bring back. And it's not. I wish I remembered them better.
Yeah. You don't really hear many people talk about the sequels very often, do you? I don't think they're particularly celebrated, which again is amazing given how iconic this creature is, really. Because again, like, we haven't really had any big kind of remakes or anything either. You know, it's not like a story that has been told over and over again, at least overtly. Like, there have been a couple of kind of failed attempts, I believe, at remaking it, right? I think there was one in the 80s that I think Nigel Neal was going to script, and then I think John Carpenter maybe was going to do one at some point, but it's never actually happened, has it?
No, well, unless you count Shape of Water, which is a continuation of what Guillermo wanted to do with the creature in any case. But the truth is, there's not that much in the story in the first place.
Yeah.
So isn't this basically Anaconda, for example?
Right, yeah.
An expedition in the jungle that turns wrong. It depends which elements you want to take. And if the element that stands out really is the creature, then if the sequels were not popular, it's interesting that we haven't seen a proper remake using the creature design, but I'm sure that everybody also wants to bring in changes to that design. And what are you going to do? How are you going to make it that much better? By the way, I saw the suit from Shape of Water at the Academy Museum. I don't know if you saw it. I don't know if it was on display when you saw it. But I
don't think it was, sadly. No.
Gorgeous the paint job is on that suit. It was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I want to ask you about that movie in just a minute. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think it's clearly a movie, though, that I think has inspired other works, you know, Shape of Water obviously being one of them. I was even wondering on this most recent watch whether it was any inspiration for Spielberg in Jaws as well, you know, those underwater shots of people swimming, even moments. I mean, the score is quite big, but even moments of the score, there are like little tiny moments where it almost sounds a bit Jaws-like when we've got, the underwater shots of the creature swimming and that kind of thing. And yeah, I can just imagine that it probably did, you know, inspire visually quite a lot of films and filmmakers that came after this.
Most likely. And especially when you do anything underwater, you research what people have done before you. So even in the very unlikely scenario that Spielberg hadn't seen the movie by the point he made Jaws, which I don't believe, he would have researched it at the time, I'm sure. For sure. There's only so many. By 1975, I think there was only so many examples of movies that successfully had shown a monster underwater. So I think you're completely right.
There was a great there was a great Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode about all the jocks on the school swim team were using like steroids. They were like doping in order to get stronger and be better on the swim team. And then that was having these weird side effects where they turned into creatures from the Black Lagoon, basically. It was great. Really fun way to kind of merge Creature from the Black Lagoon with a kind of classic kind of Buffy-esque teen high school drug story, you know? So good.
Yeah, they did an Invisible Woman on the same season, if I remember well.
Yes, they did. They kind of ticked off all the major monsters in those first couple of seasons. Yeah. And there was a Frankensteinian one about these like nerdy incel boys trying to like create the perfect woman from bits of other women and stuff. Yeah, love it. Buffy gives us all the best reference points. But yeah, but then you get a Best Picture winning monster movie that owes itself completely, I think, to Creature from the Black Lagoon, right? But The Shape of Water. What did you think of The Shape of Water?
It's Creature from the Black Lagoon by way of Jean-Pierre Jeunet.
Yeah, yes.
There's a lot about it that I hugely admire. And again, the suit, I think, is incredible in the way that that the eyes blink and that the creature moves. And there's so much about that I really love.
Yeah, me too. It looks stunning, doesn't it? I mean, Guillermo del Toro, you always know you're in safe hands with him, don't you, in terms of the visuals. It's just so kind of sumptuous. The creature design, the way it moves, the eyes, that Doug Jones performance, and the cinematography. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I love it. I just love the fact that this, really prestigious Best Picture winning film is basically a remake of 50s monster movie Creature from the Black Lagoon, right? There's something really incredible about that. So just to wrap up on Creature, I mean, I was going to ask you where it ranks for you amongst your kind of universal horror favorites. It sounds like it's kind of nearer the bottom for you, but, as we've discussed, there's still a lot to admire, right?
Yes, but that's also because the others are very, very high for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that The Creature is a movie I don't like at all. It just means that I love the others, and that this one by comparison is a little bit lower on that ladder. But I don't know. They all have a charm. Or almost all. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the Phantom, but the black and white is gorgeous. There's so much. There's no point where you're going to tell me, look, Axel, we're going to talk about The Creature from the Black Lagoon. You should rewatch it. Where I'm going to say, oh God, not that.
Yeah.
It's always delightful. It's always delightful to be able to revisit. So.
I completely agree with you. Like it's watching it this week in preparation for this, I do find myself getting slightly restless during, like you say, some of those more repetitive sequences towards, in the second half. But I really did love it when I watched it on the big screen last year. So I think, and watching it with other people, just like taking in those gorgeous visuals and just how technically incredible this movie is. I think it's really to be admired from a kind of technical standpoint. But I think, I think it's really interesting and unusual in that way because it feels more concerned with beauty than with horror, right? Which is kind of really interesting for like a universal monster movie. Yeah, it
inspires you with a sense of awe, which is appropriate when you're making a movie that takes place in nature, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's going to be something we're going to talk about throughout this whole series. We've talked about it with King Kong, of course, Godzilla. Like, these are movies where the filmmakers want you to marvel in awe at the beauty of these creatures just as much as it wants us to be afraid of them, I think,
Yeah, and I think that in that respect, it absolutely works.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, Axel, thank you so much for joining me. It's been such a pleasure to have you back. And I'm sure you'll be back again at some point in the future. Until then, let people know where they can find you online, where they can check out maybe some of your work that you've got out at the moment. Let people know.
Right. I'm on Instagram, Axel Carolyn. I don't know if there's a special symbol between Axel and Carolyn. I can't remember, but there's not a ton of us. And I recently directed a couple of episodes for a show called Them, the Scare, which is season 2 of Them for Prime.
Oh, which, by the way, I loved it, Axel, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Awesome.
It was so good. Like, I struggled a little bit with season 1, but I really enjoyed season 2. I thought it was great.
The first season is very brutal, and it's the horror hits very, very hard and very close to reality, which is disturbing and difficult to get through for a lot of people. The second season is not like that, and you can watch the second season without having the first one. The second season is kind of more like a slasher by way of 90s police kind of seven, and it was really fun to work on, and I was super excited when I got to watch the whole season. I thought it really held up, so I'm very proud of having been part of that. So it's called Them the Scare, and it's on Prime.
Love that. Well, Axel, Carolyn, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me again. Thank you.
A big thank you to the brilliant Axel Carolyn. What a treat to get to discuss that classic monster movie with her. So, as promised, I'm now going to drop you a little conversation that came out on Patreon a few months ago. Earlier on this year, in around February 2024, I ran a little exclusive mini-season for $10 Patreon subscribers. It was an Oscars mini-season. So as part of that, we basically covered 4 kind of horror or horror-adjacent movies that had been nominated for Best Picture or had actually won Oscars. So as part of that mini-season, we covered Taxi Driver, Ghost, There Will Be Blood. It was a really, really fun few weeks, and we finished by discussing Guillermo del Toro's monster movie spectacular, a film that actually took the Best Picture Oscar, The Shape of Water, of course, from 2017. I sat down with friend of the pod and my Fresh Blood co-host, Steph McKenna, to discuss this film in depth. So you're about to hear our spoilerific discussion recorded back in February. Please enjoy our conversation on The Shape of Water.
This may very well be the most sensitive asset ever to be housed in this facility.
You may think that thing looks human. Stands on 2 legs, right? But we're created in the Lord's image. You don't think that's what the Lord looks like, do you?
This creature is intelligent, capable of language, of understanding emotions.
Hi, Steph McKenna. Welcome back.
Hi, Mike Muncer. I'm so thrilled to be back.
So lovely to have you back. Yeah, it's so
it's
nice.
It's a lovely way to spend a Sunday, isn't it? I feel like I get to hang out with a friend, but also not leave my house or wear proper clothes.
Exactly, right?
Great.
It's the dream, yeah. So we are doing a little Oscar mini-season on Patreon at the moment, and, we are going to talk about a Best Picture winning monster movie, of course, The Shape of Water from 2017, which was kind of an amazing moment, I think, wasn't it? For us horror fans, for us weirdos, for people that don't necessarily pay that much credence to the big Oscar-winning movies because horror usually gets snubbed. It was pretty amazing to see a movie like this and a director like this take away the big awards that year, right?
Yeah, great win for the Sexy Fish film. It was nominated for 13 Academy Awards, won 4, including Best Picture and Best Director. I think it was the second fantasy film to win Best Picture ever after Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King.
Yes.
And there was some... I was looking back at the category list, and there were some absolute bangers nominated for Best Picture that year. You had Call Me By Your Name, Get Out, Lady Bird, Phantom Thread, 3 Billboards. That was a great year for film.
Good year.
Yeah, and it was amazing to see films like The Shape of Water and Get Out in such a category, like genre films really getting their moment.
Yeah.
And I think contrasting those 2 films makes for quite an interesting discussion because they both deal with the exploitation of marginalised people, but The Shape of Water does feel like the more palatable Hollywood version of that, wrapped up in, beautiful big production and cinematography and costume. It's sort of a classic fairy tale with a twist, isn't it? So it's kind of...
Yes.
I felt like the judges probably felt, it could have been Dunkirk, could have been Darkest Hour. I feel like they probably felt like they were being a bit brave with The Shape of Water.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's still... It has that, it's quite referential in terms of its sort of classic cinema and acknowledging a love of cinema, which is sort of peppered everywhere throughout the film. So it's kind of got all the elements they love, right? Except a bit of sexy fishy stuff.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's really interesting that, isn't it? In some ways it's a kind of left field choice, but in other ways it does feel classic Oscar bait, doesn't it? Like you say, it's a love letter to cinema. It's made by this kind of very beloved man in the industry who had been making films for about 30 years at this point and was almost overdue, right? I think his recognition, and it is quite. It's quite unabashedly cheesy, actually. We'll talk about it, but there are moments in this film I'm like, wow, I forgot how it really does go for that kind of schmaltz, doesn't it? And throughout a lot of this movie.
It's not none of it is subtle, really. And it's probably, whilst watching it, I was like, this is honestly the nicest film I could talk about on evolution of horror, really, isn't it? It's like the most heartwarming, romantic film.
Well, you say that, Steph, but 2 weeks ago, me and Rihanna talked about Ghost with
That's
Patrick
true.
Swayze. So, you know.
I did love that episode. That was, brilliant. That's, it's...
But you're right. It is a very sweet, wholesome film, what we're about to get into, with a few moments of absolute excruciating gore and body horror as well, which I'm really into. So let's begin. We're going to talk about this film, kind of spoilerific detail. Steph, set us up. Give us a little brief plot synopsis of The Shape of Water.
Okay, so The Shape of Water is set in Baltimore in 1962 during the Cold War, and it follows a young woman called Eliza who works as a kind of cleaner housekeeper for a high security government facility. And on the surface, she lives this quiet, simple, very routine life, and she shares that with her only friends, who are her neighbour Giles and her colleague Zelda. And she's quite a lonely person. It's exacerbated by the fact that she is mute and she communicates via sign language. So that singles her out as different, and it makes her feel quite isolated from others. And then one day, this newcomer arrives at the government lab, Colonel Richard Strickland, and he has brought with him this mysterious creature that he caught in a river in South America. And Eliza begins to visit this amphibian creature, which is never given a name, and the pair kind of find themselves falling rapidly in love. And then it falls to her to help it to escape from imprisonment before the US government can exploit it in the space race.
Indeed, yeah. And it all there's a whole element of it that I sort of forgot about the kind of like Soviets and all of that stuff as well, and the Russian spies, right? It feels very kind of classic Hollywood in that regard, doesn't it, in terms of the story? Yeah.
There are a few elements of this that feel classic Hollywood that I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But I'd kind of forgotten about that stuff too. I just mainly remembered the fish sex, but
it's the main bit we all remember,
fish,
right? Exactly.
I'm not really watching any like someone bonking a fish like too graphically, but
So, what do you think of the film, Steph? Are you a fan?
I am. I haven't rewatched this film since seeing it at the cinema, but I really enjoyed it. It's such a solid piece of cinema and filmmaking. It's got this incredible cast, incredible performances, beautiful set design, this romance story wrapped up in a creature movie, and it has that real delightful musicality through the sound and the music, and it all just weaves together beautifully. And it's a film that needs to be experienced on the big screen the first time, I think, because it does provoke all that wonder and that high emotion that you want from seeing a film. It's also just typically Del Toro. I think it encapsulates everything that I love about his work, that kind of blending of fairy tale and reality. It's a fairy tale for adults, and a lot of his filmmaking is kind of, I feel like that sums up a lot of his work, but he's such a brilliant filmmaker, and I really love his work, and I always love the creatures in his films and the humanity that he brings to these mysterious creatures. And this is definitely a film that sort of identifies and aligns itself with those who aren't seen as representing the status quo or the majority or those in power. So it's got a huge amount of heart. And I was reading a little bit earlier about how Del Toro said that this project was really healing for him. And I think that warmth and that sincerity really comes across. It's not, as you mentioned before, it's not a subtle film.
No.
Which probably makes it it feels like it's his most accessible to this point. Feels like a more audience friendly film. But it's a beautiful escape, I think.
Yeah.
And we finally get to explore what it would be like to have sex with a fish man.
It answers the big questions, right? The things we've all been wondering.
We've all debated. Yeah. We've all wondered. And, here it is.
Exactly. I agree with you. This is only the second time I've seen it since I first saw it at the cinema, or a press screening, I think, back in the day. And it was like, I loved it first time round. Weirdly, I've kind of haven't really felt the need to go back and watch it again. I was kind of interested to see what I thought about it this time round. And I still really enjoyed it. I think for me, it is, like you said, it's definitely the most accessible of everything he's done. I don't personally love it as much as like Pan's Labyrinth, for example. I think does a lot of the same things that this movie does, but in a much more interesting, dark, just like, I think it's a much better movie in a way. And it almost feels a bit like I said, The Shape of Water was kind of Del Toro's long overdue Best Picture win, when actually he probably deserved it more for some of his earlier films. You know, it's one of those examples, you know?
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Doesn't touch Pan's Labyrinth. But it's like the Hollywood friendly Pan's Labyrinth, isn't there? There's a few parallels between these films in terms of sort of characters and symbolism and all those kinds of things that you think, this is the more sort of big audience friendly version of Pan's Labyrinth. And in a lot of ways it ticks all of people like us, our boxes, right? Like, it is such a love letter to kind of monster movies and classic Hollywood, and it really has got that kind of, you know, obviously like Creature from the Black Lagoon kind of parallel and that kind of thing, but also feels a bit King Kong or Beauty and the Beast or any of those kind of love stories, right? Where you've got like the woman falling in love with the beast, I suppose. Yeah. And it does it again, like just very much kind of classic storytelling in that regard, doesn't it? Yeah. Really does. But it does sort of, you know, toy a bit more with some of the kind of unanswered questions in those other classic films. You know, like what would happen if the creature did end up with, you know, the damsel in distress, or you know, this is a film I think that gives Eliza a bit more agency in terms of her sexuality and her desire, so that's explored a little bit more. So there are some interesting, it's definitely I hate saying a love letter to anything, but it is a bit of a love letter to those types of films. But it's also, you can definitely see that Del Toro's gone, okay, well, what would happen if this played out a different way?
It also feels kind of French to me as well. Do you get that vibe? Like, it feels a bit Amélie or something like that. Something to do with the music and the tone of it. I get, like, French cinema vibes from this movie, you know?
Absolutely. Is it the accordion? It might be the accordion.
Maybe it's just the accordion,
I totally thought the same, though, when I was listening to the score this morning, making breakfast, feeling like I was back in time, and I should have been listening to it on a record player, because it's such a lovely score. But it does have a kind of, not whimsical, but there's a sense of wonder there and a real sense of love, and it's like Amélie. It is.
Yeah, it's kind of, and it almost feels like it wants to be a musical. Like, it's very almost a musical, this film, right? Like, you've got tap dancing sequences, there is a kind of musical fantasy sequence where she sings, right? And there are constant kind of Hollywood musicals playing on the TV in the background. Like, I almost felt like, did Del Toro originally want this to be a musical? Because it feels like it's inches away from being a full-on musical. Do you know what I mean?
I wish it had been like an erotic amphibian musical. That would have been stunning to see. But yeah, you're right. There's a choreography to both Eliza and I don't know what to call him, the asset. The asset.
Yes.
They both have a real, there's a choreography and musicality to the way they both move. You know, obviously the creature is quite, I don't know, he moves like he's underwater all the time, and Eliza has this level of gracefulness to the way that she moves around, and there's that real sense of her and Giles in particular seeking escapism through those classic films and through musicals. And she's, you know, even when she's stuck in the monotony of her everyday life cleaning at this laboratory, she's taking a moment to have a dance around her broom, and she's, you know, her internal life is clearly so much richer than her external life. There's something going on imaginatively inside where she is able to view the world with much more of a sense of wonder and fairy tale and magic. And I think that's really, it's just lovely to see.
It is really lovely. What do you think of Eliza then as our sort of main character? Like you say, like, it's interesting even the introduction to her is really interesting, right? How she has her routine where she has a little bath wank before work and everything, right? And even that stuff is really interesting because it's such an odd tone of like, oh, this is like she gets full frontal naked in that opening scene, and you go, oh right, yeah, that's right, this is a movie for grown-ups. Like, it is a fairy tale for adults, right? But like you say, it's still got that kind of quite childlike innocence to it at the same time, and it's quite an odd mix, isn't it, in a way?
It is, yeah, but a routine, well-timed bath wank with an egg timer.
Well, oh my god, she really sticks rigidly to her timings as well.
I was going, what is going on with this? But she knows she's got her timekeeping on lock. I really like, I mean, it's hard not to like Eliza. She's this wonderful, compassionate, sort of graceful character, a brilliant performance from Sally Hawkins. And she, like you say, she has this quiet, mundane, routine way of life. And a really interesting background, because she's, you know, we're told that she's this orphan who was found by the side of the river as a baby, and she's got these gill-like scars on her neck, which may or may not be why she is mute, and she communicates through sign language. And she has this so she's obviously got this natural affinity to water from birth, which binds her to the asset quite quickly. But she has this, Sally Hawkins' performance is so open, and her body language is spectacular. She's able to convey so much through body language. There's that moment when Giles is asking her if the waiter at the cafe that he goes to really wants him to come back with him, and she sort of rolls her eyes and like chokes on her pie because it's so disgusting. And there's just all these tiny moments that are just really charming about her, and very endearing. But she's also she's very principled, she's very strong, especially when she faces a character like Strickland, and she's quite calm and inquisitive in the face of severed fingers. She picks them up and interrogates them and puts them in a bag. Nothing scares her, nothing spooks her, does it? No, and I can only assume that comes from having to, those are emotions and behaviours that she's had to master through feeling so othered by society. She says at one point, if we do nothing, neither are we. She's very principled, and she can stand up against, good against evil, I guess. We only really get a sense of her, how lonely she is, when she falls in love with the creature, and she gives that amazing speech and says, the way he looks at me, he doesn't know what I lack or how I'm incomplete. And that really, she sees herself reflected back in this creature, and their differences are the same, and she approaches it because of the way that she has lived and her difference. She's able to approach him with this real open acceptance from the very beginning. And she's just I don't know what isn't there to love about Sally Hawkins and about this character. They're just... Sally Hawkins, wonderful. Right? Just one of the most inherently likeable actors on screen, I think, as well. And maybe it's because she always plays such lovely characters, right? And we think of her from things like, obviously, the Paddington films. She used to be in a lot of Mike Leigh stuff back in the day, right? I remember one of the earliest films I probably became aware of her might have been Blue Jasmine, where she was played opposite Cate Blanchett and that, right? But she is so good, isn't she? She really is. Like, she seems to be able to do anything, and she's so good in this. Like you say, it's a physical performance more than anything else. Sally Hawkins is quite a contrast to Michael Shannon, isn't she? Because she does, she plays these lovely roles, and then Michael Shannon has found himself occupied, not all the time, but he does play a villain especially well. Oh my God. He's so cold and sinister. So good, right? Let's talk about him in this, because again, this reminds me a bit of Pan's Labyrinth. Del Toro is so good at his villains, right? Like, as we've discussed, the monsters are never really the villains in his movies. He kind of loves the monsters, right? And you can feel that in most of his films. And the villains tend to be these men that kind of represent the power, the system, like whether or fascism, whatever it might be, right? And always horrific things happening to them. Like, I was thinking of Pan's Labyrinth, where you've got the bad guy, the fascist, who gets the slice in his face, and he keeps sewing it up, and it keeps bursting again and again. And there's something very similar in this movie, isn't there, with Michael Shannon in his gross, smelling, rotting fingers. Manky smelling fingers that he just It's like, dude, everyone's uncomfortable. You smell. Why can't you? But he doesn't care. He's just so oblivious, or he just doesn't care. It's a real... Yeah, you're right. He's the moral monster of the film, isn't he? He's the real
He has almost
monster.
no redeeming qualities about him, right?
No.
Like, one of the first times we see him, like, it's like Del Toro wants him to be as repulsive as possible, right? And he's always eating those weird little sweets and chewing on things. The first time we see him when he goes and, like, urinates in front of the cleaners and then doesn't wash his hands and kind of makes a point about there are certain men that wash their hands too much that show weakness or something, and it's like, wow.
It's like, what are you talking? He can justify anything, can't he? He is almost comically 2D in his villainy here. He is.
Yeah.
He's this powerful, misogynistic, heterosexual white dude, and he's very comfortable with his place in the pecking order of society, and he revels in torturing those he views as below him, both kind of physically and mentally. And he, you know, from not just the violence he inflicts on the asset, which is very brute, but the way he bullies Hofstetler and the smug way he speaks down to Eliza and Zelda, as you say. He kind of has this physically intimidating style of dominance. He will pee in front of these women. He's kind of shoving this phallic cattle prod around in front of them. And it does have a real parallel with, I wrote his name down, it's Vidal in Pan's Labyrinth. The guy
That's right.
There's that bit where he hooks his finger in Hofstetler's mouth, which really reminded me of that. The kind of the sewing up of the cheek.
That's right.
In Pan's Labyrinth.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, that is a real horrible, nasty moment, that, isn't it? I love it. It's again weird, this film, in terms of the tones, because those bursts of like extreme violence in this movie are quite shocking, actually, when you're in such a kind of like whimsical, almost rom-com, right, for the most part.
Yeah, you're kind of lulled into a false sense of security, and I think it's also especially troubling to see because he is a man that justifies violence and hatred by, you know, masking himself as this hardworking family man with religious values and a strong sense of kind of morality. And, you know, he's got a wife and 3 kids, and he aligns himself with Samson. It's like complete, it's just so cringe. He's got no awareness of his own flaws. You know, to so brazenly talk about your pussy finger in front of people.
Oh my
is
God.
like,
So
it's
good.
just
So good.
It's
just as
grim.
repulsive a character as we've ever seen on screen, I think. And Michael Shannon, like you say, he's just like, he's so good at playing baddies, isn't he? Baddies and weirdos. He's just brilliant.
Yeah, Iceman, Boardwalk Empire.
Oh.
Even like a weird character, like his character in Knives Out is kind of, you know, he's not, you know, the evil villain, but he's just still a prick, isn't he?
He absolutely
he's just so
is.
good. He's just such a sinister presence. I wonder whether it bothers him.
I know, I think he
cute
loves
and
it.
cuddly in real life.
Yeah, I wonder.
revels
No,
in it,
I
doesn't
think
he?
he's quite intense and scary, I've heard, in real life. Like, I think he's not the most fun. I think he takes his performances like very seriously. Yeah, exactly. It's like that kind of a person. But he is very good, very compelling to watch for sure. I love his weird little like his awkward little sex scene with his wife is hilarious. Like with his smelly fingers, and he keeps his socks on, his little Y fronts around his ankles and stuff. It's so good.
And he's got this weird fascination with Eliza. And there's that kind of parallel between he almost like smothers his wife, you know, he covers her mouth to stop her to make her mute. So you get the sense that he's fantasizing about Eliza, and it's because she stands up to him and because she doesn't show fear in front of him, and that really fascinates him, I think, and it's something that he wants to tear down.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, I love the way this film looks, though. I love that kind of picture perfect 1950s suburbia home that he lives in, and the moment when he picks out his teal Cadillac and everything as well. Those Cadillacs did look really nice, didn't they? I was like, wow, look at these.
He looks really fucking cool in that Cadillac, I gotta say.
Yeah.
He looked pretty cool.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the colours in this film is a lot of teal and blue and watery colours, of course. But as you say,
of course,
when you go to his house, there's this almost like overwhelming sense of yellow and brightness, and like, look at how picture perfect this nuclear family is. But it's almost, I don't know, it's almost sickening. It's like too much compared to everything else, and it's such a facade.
What do you make of Richard Jenkins in this as Giles? What do you think of him?
I like him. I mean, he's one of Eliza's only friends. They kind of have this. It's almost like a brother-sister relationship, isn't it? And he's this closeted, aging homosexual who has lost his job, and he's clearly struggling to find work. I was trying to work out, did he have a relationship with his colleague? There almost felt like there was a bit of when he was talking to that guy.
It feels a bit like maybe that's his boss or whatever, and he has been maybe slightly pushed out because of that, right? Like you kind of get that impression.
And he has this really heartbreaking storyline when he keeps buying the disgusting key lime pie because he fancies that guy, and it's just so it's so. And
the bit in the guy in the diner, this is the thing about this film, is that it's very broad strokes, right? The goodies and the baddies, right? And when he suddenly becomes this like bigoted monster, and not only like rejects Richard like Giles's kind of making the move on him, but then also shouts at a pair of black people that walk in and tells them they can't sit there. It really doubles down, doesn't it, on this idea of the kind of the racism, the misogyny, these kinds of tropes in these kind of 1950s white men, right?
Yeah, it's not subtle in the same way that, Eliza is disabled and her best friends are a black woman and a homosexual man. They are marginalized people coming together, and partially because they share a sense of a difference and they know what it's like to be seen as quote unquote the minority in society.
Yeah, and I think because the film has such broad strokes in the way it kind of, I don't know, it kind of lumps all of these others, quote unquote, together, doesn't it, in a way? And I know that there were some critiques of the film because of that, right? It's a very kind of simplified, like we said, there's not a whole lot of subtlety. There were certain activists with disabilities, such as Dominic Evans, who believed that the film is sort of saying that it's almost like, Sally Hawkins' character, without being cured, she's not going to be loved or worthwhile to any other human beings. And this is furthered by the end scene of the film, where Eliza and the creature appear to kind of leave our world behind, essentially, right? And this kind of drawing comparisons between kind of being some sort of minority or having a disability and being this unlovable monster, I suppose. And I don't think, I think Del Toro's heart is very much in the right place, though, right? It's just that it's a very broad stroke fairy tale way of telling this story.
It is. And maybe I'm relying too much on the fact that I think Del Toro's heart is in the right place. But I mean, he loves to celebrate an outsider, again, quote unquote, an outsider. That's why he's drawn to the monsters, and that's why he loves the creatures and people who are forced to operate on the fringes.
It worked on a broad audience, and I think that's a good thing. When a movie is well made and well written and its heart is in the right place, if it can reach the biggest possible audience because maybe it is slightly more accessible than something, for example, like Zone of Interest, which I think is a masterpiece, but that's not an easy to watch movie that's going to reach big mainstream audiences, Is it? Like, it's not the same thing,
No, and it's kind of like the Barbie effect, I guess. Like, Barbie's had a lot of criticism for its feminism, and again, it's like, it's very broad brushstrokes, though, isn't it? And you're getting a lot of people into the cinema to see that, who are listening to that message, and yes, it's not very nuanced, but I don't know. But it's not always a good thing.
Maybe it's a starting point as well, isn't it? That's the thing. And I think Del Toro himself he's talked about this a lot, but I think he's always felt like the outsider, like the freak, like the monster, right? Because of he was an outsider, literally, and then because of the way he looks and because of the types of stories he liked to tell and types of movies he liked to make, like he always felt like the weirdo, right? And I think that's the thing, like that he loves the outsiders, he loves the others, and again, so I don't know, I kind of totally get what he's doing in this movie, and it's something that he's done throughout all of his movies up until this point, really. But again, like we keep saying, in this movie it's just a little bit more on the surface than previous films.
And when you know, we as people who kind of watch a lot of horror, and horror is a genre that deals with the concept of the outsider a lot. You know, it's something that I think we're probably very well versed in, and that we consider quite a lot, and we interrogate quite a lot. And not all audiences are doing that, so they might not be going to see a film like this that often. You know, not a lot of people are going to be going to see would anticipate or expect to be going to see a creature feature like this. It's kind of part fairy tale, part sci-fi.
Yeah.
It might draw a lot of people in that it doesn't always kind of attract.
I remember I've spoken about this before on the pod, but it reminds me of Spike Lee when he made Black Klansman. And do you remember how Black Klansman, again, not a subtle film, and it literally ends with footage of Trump and Charlottesville at the end, right? And I remember coming out of that, me and Rihanna came out of that, and we were like, I mean, it was powerful, but also, did we need that? Like, we got it. We got the message.
Whacking
like,
it over
we didn't
the
necessarily. But also, and I know Spike Lee talked about that in interviews, and he sort of said, look, now is not the time to be subtle. Like, maybe right now, look at what's going on in the world. Maybe right now is the time to be screaming this in people's faces, that this is happening, you know? And I think that's, in a way, like, to a lesser extent, that is what movies like Barbie are doing as well. And I think, yes, like, sometimes maybe subtlety isn't the best thing in a way right now. Maybe that's not what we need, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it probably says something that these, as you say, we're in a period of time where these films still need to be made. And despite this being a story that is very much set in a particular sort of socio-political context, it still has a universality to it. And, you know, the concept of the fairy tale, you know, fairy tales for children allow kids to kind of, you know, explore feelings that are new to them, or things that scare them or cause anxiety, and it helps them to sort of interrogate that good and evil, and that help them to understand that sort of morality. And this is a film that's doing that on a kind of more adult level, but arguably we still need that.
Agreed. Should we talk about the fish? Let's talk about Doug Jones as the fish. You know, Doug Jones, absolute legend, right? In terms of like monster performances, prosthetics. He played a lot of the monsters, like the Pale Man and the Faun in Pan's Labyrinth, right? He was one of the gentlemen in the Buffy episode Hush. Like, he's just played so many absolute icons, hasn't he? What do you think of him in this movie?
Doug Jones is an absolute legend. I completely forgot that he plays the gentleman. Of course he does. Of course he does. I
know, right?
So many scary creatures.
Good.
And the Pale Man, I think, has got to be up there as like my favourite creature of all time, maybe. I remember seeing that in the cinema and thinking, holy shit. Like, absolutely
incredible.
Insane. Yeah, and in here, so he plays the amphibian man, or the asset. I really want to call him Abe, but I know he is not Abe Sapien from Hellboy. I know, but
yes. Oh my god, I forgot about Hellboy. Yeah,
it's kind of maybe they're like distant relatives. Let's just say they're distant relatives. I'm not saying they're the same, but there's I keep wanting to call him Abe, so I have to not do that. Yes. The asset, but he's this long-term. Doug Jones is a long-term collaborator of Del Toro, as you say. He was in Mimic, Hellboy, Pan's Labyrinth, Crimson Peak, in fact, and his character fits so well with Eliza in so many ways, including the way that they move together. They have this kind of flowing, choreographed, dance-like range of motion, and I think Jones did a lot of sort of, you know, practice a lot of that movement in a dance studio, so it's very much informed by dance. And he has this kind of almost like there's a regal element to him. It's very refined, but he's also ripped. He's got this massive six-pack.
Well, this is what's weird, right, as well. There is a kind of sexy gaze upon this monster, isn't there? For sure. Like you say, when he stands upright and you see his six-pack and he literally starts glowing and he's dripping, you know, and it's like, wow, there is this weird, like, sexualizing of this fish from the very beginning, right?
From
it's
the
so
start,
funny.
it's kind of, he is I guess as a kid, I sort of fancied the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, and maybe now I fancy do I fancy the Fish Man? Maybe I do fancy the Fish Man, but he's...
I mean, you're only human, Steph.
So I just can't help it. It is... But yeah, you're right. It's all kind of a bit drippy, and he's a sexy man, and he's I want to call him a him. I'm going to call him a him. And he's he's this mysterious creature that's come from the rivers of South America, and he's treated by government officials, of course, as this specimen to be examined and dissected and exploited. And he's actually worshipped as God in his home country. But, people like Strickland in the US call him an affront. But despite this treatment, he is a creature that is sort of naturally inquisitive and gentle and kind. And he in return accepts and celebrates difference. And he has this kind of loving. So he helps Giles out by helping him to grow his hair. He's obviously quite a naturally generous spirit. And his love with Eliza kind of exists outside of traditional communication. They're able to, they express themselves through movement and through music and through eggs and through sign language.
It's a lot of eggs, right? A lot of eggs going on in this film. There's the egg timers. There's a lot of eating of eggs. It's a lot of.
What's the egg about?
I want to say the word ovaries, Steph. I don't know. That's what I want to say to you.
Do you know? You're right. That's probably true, though. It's. I was thinking about that. I was like, what is the significance of the egg? Yeah, maybe just fertility.
Yeah, exactly. Fertility. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it probably is, right? Controversially, though, the cat does not survive in this movie. Now, we got a really funny comment on Patreon. I think it was on last week's episode, where listener Miri has said how much she's been enjoying this Oscars mini-season, and then she's put, but I will have to respectfully decline from listening to the Shape of Water episode because I don't want a rage aneurysm. And I was like, wow. So I replied and I was like, I need to know what's your issue? And she's put, let's just say that if my best friend intentionally flooded my bathroom so she could shag a fish who murdered my cat, we would not be friends anymore.
Yeah, that's nightmare roommate, really, isn't it? That is
yeah.
That's true. Do you know what? I almost forgot about the cat. It goes for there's still a raw animalism to this asset.
Well, I think that's right. He's still a dangerous beast as well, right? I think that's important to kind of lay out in that moment. Yeah.
It's quite easy to humanize him because it shows levels of sort of emotional intelligence and communication. But yeah, there is that raw animalism too. But that kind of ties into the sort of the sexual. I mean, I don't want to say, I'm not saying killing a cat is sexy. That is absolutely not what I'm saying.
That's a very niche kink, Steph, you've got there. Like, wow.
But it's going to be out there, though, isn't it? I mean, I'm willing to bet fish kinks are actually quite popular, but this might be a slightly more niche thing. But no, that situation aside, it kind of ties back to this asset being quite sexy, and it's very much a film about female desire and sexuality, not just because there is an implied sex scene, but it's, Eliza isn't just the damsel in distress that you see in kind of, I don't know, other monster movies. She isn't sexually repressed really long before she meets the asset. She is fully in touch with her own sexual desires. Yeah. She's quite sexually empowered for a woman in the 60s. It's a time when her behaviour would have very much gone against the expected roles and behaviour of women in society. Yeah. I had to Google Giles's anecdote about cornflakes being invented to stop masturbation because I really wanted to know whether that's true. And that's true. So John Harvey Kellogg was celibate and he was staunchly against masturbation and sex, and masturbation in particular. I don't know why.
That's so funny.
I'm not really sure why cereal would calm that down in any way. But anyway, he was a bad dude generally. And so Eliza's behaviour would horrify.
Wow.
Really
I love that. And again, there's that idea that sexuality in this film does kind of represent a sort of freedom and liberation, doesn't it, for these characters, I suppose. And it's that idea of anything natural or nature in this film it's very much, actually I could have included it in my next season of the podcast, this kind of nature biting back idea, really, right? Like nature triumphing over everything else, and everything wrapped up in that, whether it's the water imagery, the eggs, the fertility, the sex, all of that kind of thing. Yeah,
it's just a very overtly female sensuality about this whole film, isn't it? As you say, like the water, water is quite a motherly, maternal, female kind of presence as well. The sea, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, it absolutely is, actually. And I think there's that. I wonder if that's another reason, because people were very shocked by the sex scene, right? The Sally Hawkins having sex with the fish man. But there have been so many movies in the past, about men falling in love with mermaids, right? Whether it's The Little Mermaid or movies like Splash with Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah. Like, there are essentially, this is a mermaid, right? A merman, really, I suppose, in a lot of ways. And it's funny that people were so shocked by that moment and this storyline and weirded out by it, when really, again, like we've sort of said, it's a kind of age-old tale, I think, isn't it, that we've seen a lot in cinema, but maybe it just because it did it more explicitly in this or something.
I don't know what it is that freaks people out. So it's not exactly like it's that over. I mean, it's not an incredibly graphic sex scene, is it? And as you say,
it's really not.
If the roles were reversed, we see that quite often. And actually, the most distressing sex scene in this film is Strickland with his wife. I mean, the violence in that scene is horrible, and it's horrifically uncomfortable. Whereas, for Eliza and the asset, their relationship is unusual, but it's not. There's a sense of innocence there that I kind of think you mentioned before, and it's not. I don't feel it's not perverse, and even Zelda, her friend, is kind of, when she asks about what happened, the first time they're together, she's intrigued by it. She's not repulsed by it. She's just like, wow, okay, how does that work? Like, can he even?
Yes.
Does that? Yeah. There's no sense of like, what the fuck are you doing?
Right, I know. I
open
love that.
Sense of kind of, there is an openness there. And it is it's quite an innocent love.
It does make me a bit anxious, though, when they flood the bathroom. And also that they only use towels to plug the gap in the door. I was like, it's going to take more than that, guys, to fill your bathroom with water.
That certainly won't work. I'm not going to try it, but that is absolutely not going to work. And you would be livid. Yeah. So that listener is, that's fair enough. I completely understand that.
Now comes the part of the episode where I thank another 30 Kickstarter backers for helping us support Final Cut, the official Evolution of Horror card game, and help us bring it to life. It's a very exciting month for us over in EOH HQ. We are going to be finally sending out copies of Final Cut to backers over the next few weeks. So hopefully all backers should receive their game very, very soon. Also, for the people that pledged at the highest level of £150, they get their own bespoke Mike Lee Graham illustration where their face actually gets put on a playing card as a character, essentially. They get their likeness on the podcast superfan playing card. And again, Mike has completed those illustrations for the Monster tier backers, and they look incredible. I can't wait for people to receive them and start playing the game. So I'm going to read the next 30 backers who helped make this game happen. A big thank you to Will Rockfort, Mandy Foster, Sebastian Faith, John F.G. Ferrer, Frank Power, Andrea Krusberg, Sarah, Matt Quinn, Chris Newton, Lindsay Bartley, Kristen Lear, Damien Payne, Batcat Becky, Lizzie, Rachel Acton, Paddy Dunn, Jax Davis, Anne-Marie Towers, Wessel, Sarah, Chris Pembury, Emma, Christian, Roy Taylor, James Woodward, Richard Flanagan, Rob Watts, Katia Pavasevic, Callum Robertson, Jamie Thomas, and Santiago Vargs. A huge thank you to all of those people for supporting us on Final Cut. And don't forget, if you missed out on your opportunity to back the project and get your hands on the official Evolution of Horror card game, sign up to our newsletter to be the first to know when we release a batch to sell on our website. Just head to evolutionofhorror.com/newsletter. Steph, let's talk about kind of the plot, the way it progresses towards the end. I'm quite a big fan of the kind of sort of, I guess you call it almost like a heist sequence, right? When they have to break him out of the facility with the laundry van and moving the cameras and then distracting Michael Shannon, and then the Russian like Michael Stuhlbarg's character, like killing the security guard with the syringe, which is actually quite brutal. It's great, isn't it? Like, it's a really fun, and I actually think Michael Stuhlbarg's character in this, as this kind of like like Russian spy, but maybe one that wants to actually do good. And like, I think he's a really fun character in this as well, you know?
Yeah, I'd forgotten about him from my first watch, and you're kind of watching it again. You're initially tempted to view him almost in the same boat as Strickland, because he's this white dude working for a government facility, and he's not just that, he's a scientist, so he's going to have this need to observe and test and interrogate, like how is he going to understand the humanity behind this creature. And also he's Russian, terrible, awful, but you know, his interest in the creature is very tied to science, but as soon as he observes those kind of human-like qualities of the creature, and it kind of alters his moral compass, he wants to save it because he recognises that it has this intelligence and this sophisticated sort of emotional capacity. So his moral compass is still quite scientific, but it is in the right place.
Yeah, I like him. I think it's really fun. I think the film really kind of gains momentum in that final act, and then when Michael Shannon is really losing it, when Strickland is like, you know, clearly experiencing some sort of infection or something, and he's kind of like he's sort of sweaty and he's faint, but he's still running around desperately trying to, you know, win, I suppose, quote unquote, right? Even if it kills him, he's desperate to find whoever stole the asset and get it back. And all those sequences with him just kind of after them at the end, when he comes to Zelda's house with Zelda and her husband and everything, I think that's a really fun moment. And he like tears his fingers off and chucks them on the floor and stuff.
That has got to be the most disgusting part of this film, and he has it's like barely a grimace, is it? And when he's stinking up the car with his fingers, it's like disgusting. What is going on? I mean, I have a crush on Michael Shannon, and this is pushing it even for me. Like, that is it's going a bit far. But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the kind of heist movie aspect to it, because I didn't even think about that. And it is a film that plays with a lot of different genres, doesn't it? It's, you know, in parts it is a horror. It's got elements of horror, the gothic kind of fantasy, fairy tale, science fiction, and it's got this kind of like the gothic crumbling castle of Eliza and Giles's apartment, but then the lab is kind of a bit reminiscent of like Metropolis and sort of German expressionism.
Yes.
There's all these
it almost looks a bit, yes, you're right, or like kind of steampunk or something. Yeah, real
steampunk elements, and you've obviously got the B-movie horror of the creature, and there's all these different types of sort of genre and the design and the visuals and the lots of sort of symbolism that kind of weaves all these different genres together and makes it really, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a fascinating watch.
It really looks, I mean, I know we've mentioned it already, but it is really one of the most beautiful looking films, you know, in recent memory for me. It is stunning, isn't it? Like that production design, the colours, the lighting, the rain and the kind of cinema lights and all of that stuff. Like, I think it just looks absolutely gorgeous. Yeah.
No one does. I don't think anyone does kind of, as you say, production design, those kind of visuals like Del Toro. I mean, so many of his films are so striking for that. But like the set design, the costumes, the makeup, it's so detailed, and everything is kind of awash with this watery colour palette of sort of blue and green and teal, and I remember that really satisfying mint green of the locker room. It's like a really nice, I'm like, I want that mint green, that's really nice. And it's,
I know, right? Yeah, like there's a lot of colours I would happily have in my house actually in this film. I
he'd
really
be
like
great interior designer, and his creatures are a great mix of, you know, he's known to love practical effects where he can do them, and this is a sort of a mix of the creature as a sort of full body prosthetic but mixed with digital effects, so you get that real kind of, I don't know, tactile aspect to it. It's just so clever, and it looks so well, and it just feels so, I don't know what it is about his creatures, but they do just feel so fully realised, and there's that almost, a lot of them have a kind of insect-like quality too, and sort of parts that are identifiable about them, and then other parts that are completely supernatural, and I just... that man's mind, man. His imagination is just insane.
What do you think of the ending? So this kind of this big showdown with Michael Shannon. He kills them or shoots, you know, Sally Hawkins and the asset, but then of course they end up in the ocean together. And now I guess you could read this two ways, right? Because it could be that that Giles' character is actually telling us this story and has kind of made up a happy ending for them, I guess. But yeah, like in that actually it turned out that all along she was a fish creature, right? And that the scars on her throat are actually gills, we find out at the end, right? And maybe that's why she was so attracted to him and so kind of enamored with him from the very beginning, is that these two actually share some sort of connection, as they're both fish people, Steph, you know? They're both fish people.
Fish people all along. Imagine discovering later in life that you're actually a fish.
Yeah. And she does love the water. She does. We know she loves her baths, right? And like, so yeah, it kind of makes sense. But yeah, how do you kind of read that ending between the two of them?
Yeah, because crucially, Giles says, as the narrator, he says he likes to believe they lived happily ever after. So as you say, it's kind of left to the imagination, and there is a parallel again with Pan's Labyrinth in that you have this. In Pan's Labyrinth, you have this imagined happy ending with Ophelia. Like, does she really find herself reunited with her kingdom? You know, she's a princess as well. We've got the Princess Eliza, we've got the Princess Ophelia. She's reunited with her kingdom and with her family, and it's happily ever after. Or is she dead? And there's kind of the same here.
Yes.
It's like we want to think they live happily ever after. It's a perfect fairy tale. You know, the couple survive and make it for a change. You know, Eliza becomes like the creature. The creature doesn't have to adapt, you know, to be more quote unquote human, or it doesn't have to assimilate into society. She's united with him, and she was, you know, finds where she's supposed to have been all along. Or she could be dead. They might have just shot her.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's, like you say, it's such a Del Toro ending, that, isn't it? It's like you can embrace the fairy tale, or you can embrace the grim reality of what actually probably happened to, you know, people like her and other minority groups in the 1950s in a situation like this, right?
Yes, and the optimist in me would like to think that they live happily ever after. For a change, because that probably rarely happens on this podcast.
Yeah, well, it's very true. It's a very good point. So there you go. So the film obviously did really, really well, and it did win Best Picture in quite, like you said, a stacked Best Picture category. So it beat Call Me By Your Name, The Darkest Hour, Dunkirk, Get Out, Lady Bird, Phantom Thread, The Post, and 3 Billboards. Interesting there that we've got Chris Nolan, Greta Gerwig, a lot of people that are very obviously, you know, current right now, right? Paul Thomas Anderson's Phantom Thread. We talked about Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood in this mini-season last week, actually, as well, which lost out. Do you think it deserved it, Steph? Should Shape of Water have beaten those other nominees, or do you think another movie in that category deserved it more?
It is that's a really good it's a pretty good lineup that year, isn't it? I mean,
it is, isn't it?
I didn't see Darkest Hour. Again, sort of men in old person prosthetics. It's not really my vibe, but
that's the worst film in that category by a long way. But yeah.
I think it does. Phantom Thread is probably objectively... I mean, I'm a very big Call Me By Your Name fan. And yeah, big Get Out fan. But I love so many of the... I mean, Get Out, Lady Bird, they were never going... I don't think they were ever going to win that category. Maybe Phantom Thread should have pipped it, maybe in terms of it's probably the better film ever so slightly. But I think it's up there. I think it deserves it. And as you say, Del Toro has been... He's deserved this for a while. And it's a nice... You certainly can't... I couldn't be disappointed seeing him win this.
I think everyone was so happy for him, weren't they? I remember the massive standing ovation he got. Just so much love for him as a person, I think, right? When he went up and took to the stage to get his Oscar. Like you say, I think it was almost a recognition of him and everything he's done in his career so far, more than it was just saying The Shape of Water is the best film in this category.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
So he deserved to win. I've got a huge respect for the way that he's used his childhood and his experiences to shape his filmmaking very personally, and you can very much tell that everything he does comes from the heart. And how you can't, and also his success has meant that, not in this example, but a lot of Spanish language filmmaking has been brought to a wider audience. Yeah. He had quite a big impact on kind of the amount of world cinema I started seeking out in sort of my earlier adult years.
Totally. Pan's Labyrinth really opened my eyes to kind of international cinema, I think.
Just blew my head off, that film. It's still one of my favourites of all time. I just can't quite believe it exists. It's brilliant.
Same.
But yeah, I say he deserves it.
Yeah, I think so. Good on it. I mean, obviously, I would have said Jordan Peele's Get Out is my favourite in that category, but also, obviously, that was never going to win Best Picture. Imagine Get Out winning Best Picture. I mean, it definitely would never have happened. I was chuffed that it even won. It won an Oscar, though. It won Best Original Screenplay. So that in itself was astounding and amazing. But it was never going to get Best Picture, was it? Let's be honest.
Simply wasn't. And as I said before, this was like the slightly more palatable alternative.
Yeah, for sure. There you go.
Like, this one's still, talking about dismantling, power structures and the experience of marginalised people, but in a slightly more...
Absolutely. And
musical, whimsical, wonderful
And
way.
Octavia Spencer's in it too. And I feel like she's always like... she always gives that film like a stamp of kind of prestige Oscar vibe, doesn't it? Like, I always feel like Octavia Spencer is always in those types of movies. Do you know what I mean?
She is, absolutely. That's so true.
Well, there you go. Well, Steph, thank you so much. What a joy it's been to get to discuss this weird, horny little fish movie with you.
I had such a great time. Thank you for having me back on. It's been lovely.
It's been so lovely. Let people know where they can find you, your podcast, and the other stuff you do.
Yes, so you can find me on, is it Twitter? It's X now, isn't it? At Steph X McKenna. I have a podcast called The Thirst, which is a pop culture podcast that you can find by searching for The Thirst Pod. And also, if you're a big Stephen King fan, I have a zine series called Outsider, which showcases writing and drawing by women, non-binary folks, and trans men. And you can find that by looking up Outsider Zine.
Amazing. Steph, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Mike.
And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. And one more time, a huge thank you to my brilliant guests, Axel Carolyn and Steph McKenna. So let us know what you thought of this week's episode. What are your thoughts on Creature from the Black Lagoon? I would love to hear what you think. Please do get in touch. You can email me, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can also find us on all the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. And if you want to discuss this week's episode with fellow listeners, you can also join the discussion group. That's the Evolution of Horror discussion group, which you can find on Facebook, or you can join the Evolution of Horror Discord. As part of the Evolution of Horror Discord, you can also join our weekly watch-alongs, where they all watch as a community each film being discussed in our Nature Bites Back series every Sunday night UK time. Evolution of Horror is part of the EOH network, and if you want to hear more from us, then subscribe to our brand new podcast, a Twin Peaks rewatch podcast called The Detective and the Log Lady, in which Stacey Ponder and I are working our way through every episode of Twin Peaks from beginning to end. And the discussion on the pilot episode of Twin Peaks is about to drop this week. You can find this podcast in all the usual podcast places, and if you get a spare moment, I'd be so grateful if you could drop us a little rating and review on Apple Podcasts or whichever app you use, as that always really helps us get discovered by new listeners. So, on to next week then, and next week is going to be something a little bit different to what we've covered so far. We've talked here a lot about how the 1950s kind of took a turn away from the Gothic, but across the pond, over in the UK, things were about to go a bit more old school. We were going to return to the Gothic in a really interesting way. So next week, it's a Hammer Horror Week. I'm going to be joined by Graham Saunders to discuss two movies that really interestingly tiptoe into the theme of Nature Bites Back. We're going to be discussing The Hound of the Baskervilles from 1959 and The Reptile from 1966. Cannot wait. Join us next week for all of this and more on the Evolution of Horror.